Two major bond ratings companies, Moody's and DBRS, issued the report cards for Alberta this week. They both gave Alberta a AAA rating, but they also have negative things to say about our gloomy economic outlook. Graham, tell us, how important are these ratings?
There's two issues on these ratings. One is, on a very practical level, the lower the rating, the more you pay to borrow money. A higher interest rate to borrow money. That's not really an issue right now with Alberta because it's still a AAA rating. The government's saying it won't be spending any more money to borrow money, but if these ratings start to drop, it will cost the province money. But on another level, it's a symbolic slap that the province takes. This doesn't look good for the province. You got the opposition saying last year, unless the government changes its fiscal policies, we'll lose our AAA credit rating. Well, we haven't actually lost it. Of course, there was one a few weeks ago that did actually drop it to with a negative outlook and a AA plus rating.
That was that was Standard and Poor's. So it was from AAA rating to AA
plus.
Yes.
But the thing is, this does play into the opposition's narrative that things are going badly for the government and they're responsible for this. In fact, of course, it's the price of oil dropping all the time. But this does play into a narrative that things are out of control in Alberta, that the opposition is putting forward. You can argue against that. It's still the price of oil. It just doesn't look good for the NDP government.
Well, I was actually a little bit surprised because Standard & Poor's did drop the rating. I have to say, having watched The Big Short a couple of weeks ago, I'm much more skeptical about how these companies actually do their ratings. I hadn't realized quite how craven and political these numbers are because there isn't any magic formula that says, what the number should be. And in some ways, as Graham says, when interest rates are as low as they are, I think in practical terms, the numbers matter less than, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. The last time the last time oil prices were this low, interest rates were incredibly high. And any change in your credit rating, was a really, really big hit to the bottom line. But I think this is more a political thing. I mean, I think the NDP should count themselves quite lucky that they kept those AAA scores. But it's hard to know what they do. They cannot control the prices of oil, as we keep saying. But, this, I think, does send a message to the Notley government about how much more borrowing capacity they have, and it's not so much.
Jody, what about you? You were there at that press conference yesterday when Darren Billis called this, I think his words were ungenerous and short-sighted. What's at stake here? You were there at that really big climate change announcement last year, and that was really touted as the thing that was going to win us friends across the country when it came to these kinds of things. What's at stake now for this government?
Well, at stake is getting our oil to market. And we have lots of pipelines that go all through the country. But what's at stake here is getting our product to market, and we need to do that. There's all this cooperative talk from Rachel. She said, yes, we need this social license to get it to market. We are, instituting a carbon tax. We are setting a limit on on greenhouse gases. There's going to be a limit that will probably reach by 2030. And they're doing all these positive things to say, hey, Alberta is in this. We're going to reduce our greenhouse gases. And even then, nobody's really listening and saying what we're doing. So being cooperative is not working. I don't know if Brad Wall's position will work either, but...
Yeah, this is a really good point, is that the old way of doing things didn't work to get pipelines built. The NDP said we'll do a new way of doing things. We'll stop getting angry at other people, have a reasonable discussion about pipelines. And you're right, the response from other parts of Canada right now is we just don't want the pipelines, period. Another argument here that Quebec should be very aware of is the rail versus pipeline debate. Yeah. And Quebec knows firsthand what happens when you have a derailment, or can have a derailment, with pipelines as opposed to being shipped by rail. If we have more, and they will, the oil companies will ship them by rail. If they cannot build pipelines and demand for their product, they'll be shipping a lot more by rail. That's a lot more dangerous than pipelines. But going back to what Jody was saying, the NDP government thought we're going to make friends this time, and it seems they're being stymied just like the old way of doing things.